Hello everybody, Marty Richards with Richland Center Tourism here this evening on just a fantastic August evening. Really enjoying the mild temperatures, the sun, the crickets serenading us with a Wednesday version of Why Do We Call It That? Now, this is a first for us because we're actually redoing an episode. We did this location, or not so much this location, but this roadway. It was like our fourth or fifth episode. Well, since then, there's been quite a bit of information that's come up about this area that we have to share with you because just a really unique story. So this is actually part two of Why Do We Call It Nebraska Hollow? Now, the earlier version we did of Nebraska Hollow, we told you how Nebraska Hollow got its name. And it's really a little bit unusual because most of the road names and area names here in the Richland area came from those who moved here from the east. Nebraska Hollow is one of the few places we've found that is actually named after or got its name or the inspiration for it from west of Wisconsin. So in Nebraska, there's actually a hollow that looks somewhat like this that has a river that flows down through it. And the name Nebraska comes from the Native American meaning of valley which water flows through it. So that's the meaning of Nebraska. And this valley does have a little stream that flows through it, goes down, meets up with Willow Creek. Now, that's factual, very non-exciting, and not the reason that we're redoing this version. The real reason we are doing this version lies behind me. If you see over my right shoulder, take a look there to your left, you'll notice there's this little metal Quonset shed sitting there. And what happened, I have to thank several people for the information on this episode, although they don't all quite agree. I'm just going to give you the version kind of put together, formed together, so that you understand the real story here. So behind me is what we believe to be the only oil well that was ever prospected or attempted here in Richland County. So to get the story, we have to go back to about 1949 to 1952, depending on who you talk to, because there is varying questions and degrees of this story. It would not stand up on trial in court, so I'm not making any legal or for certain proclamations on this one. However, I do know this is a real story. I know that there's quite a bit of fact with it. I've actually talked with several sources regarding this. I do need to thank, of course, Richard Dieter, who gives me some inspiration on some different legendary stories that I get. I did talk with the Lewis family, John Lewis, Mike Lewis, and Jim Lewis, all kind of filled in some of the dots for me. So here goes. So it was somewhere between 1949 and 1952 that a fella who owned the land here that I'm standing on right now was convinced by another individual that there might be oil here on the land. So a couple of parts of the story you need to know. Number one, we don't really have an agreement on who the individual was who owned the land. I had one report that it was a fellow by the name of John Horner. I also had another report that it was another fellow by the name of Emmett Harold, who I'm old enough to remember who Emmett Harold was, had owned a farm over on State Highway 14. The John Horner name doesn't ring true to anybody in the area. Little confused on that. So those are two reports there. Number two, the fellow who really did the well drilling was rumored to be from Michigan and was a self-taught geologist. So no formal learning, did not have a geology degree. He had drilled water wells in Michigan, but then came to this area at the request of the landowner at the time, whoever that was, to prospect for oil. Well, what led them to believe that there was oil here? Well, this goes into legend a little bit, but reportedly he found, so the landowner one day on the stream behind me, for which Nebraska Hollow has its name, he found or witnessed some oil running in the stream. So just like Jed Clampett saw some oil in the stream, said, hey, wait a minute, there's oil here on this land. So he got his well driller who came from Michigan. They set up shop right behind me and started drilling for oil. Again, we believe that's somewhere between 1949 and 1951 when it started. Now, this went on for quite some time because a couple of things happened along the way as they were drilling for oil. So they're drilling for oil in Wisconsin. To the state of Wisconsin, this was a new thing. You're supposed to have a permit for something like that, right? Well, they had already begun drilling, and the state of Wisconsin stepped in and said, hold the phone, you need a permit for drilling for oil. You just can't show up and just start drilling and see what happens. Well, there was an issue with that, and that was no one at that point in time had tried to prospect for oil. So they just kind of stopped them and said, hey, you need a permit. We don't have such an animal. They walked through that process, and then eventually state of Wisconsin did issue the permit, so then they could continue on. Now that took some time, drawing out the process a little bit, but they did restart drilling for oil. Well, they did that for a while, ran out of money, because that costs money to keep doing that. Well, they stopped for a bit, were able to raise some more funds a year later or so, restarted drilling. So over a 2 or 3 year process, they were able to continue drilling for oil. We always wave. Again, this happened on the last Nebraska Hollow episode. Somebody drove by, they wave. We always wave. We are friendly folk here. So they continued drilling, and this was over a 3-4 year period. They drilled for oil. The state stopped them once. Drilled for oil again. They ran out of money. Drilled for some more oil. They've gotten to the point where the shaft behind me is actually somewhere around 1,300 feet deep. Now in this area, maybe that's normal in other areas, but in this area, that is a deep hole. So at that point, at about 1,300 feet, it's reported they ran into some rock formations, some schist, limestone or sandstone schist, that at that point they knew there is no way that there could ever be oil here. There's also another issue here, and that is because this is the driftless region, some geologists have told me it's just not a factual possibility that there could be oil here because it is the driftless region and hasn't had that work of deposits and different things happen over the thousands or millions or how many of years you wish to believe in occurred. It's just not a possibility. So even at that point, the landowner dejected and the oil drilling self-styled geologists have decided there is no oil. So right behind me lies the only oil drilling shaft or attempt to prospect for oil that we're aware of in Richland County. The shed behind me protects that head, that wellhead. It is believed, and actually this is somewhat factual, the University of Wisconsin did use this oil shaft, or this shaft, because there was no oil, so it's literally just a hole in the ground, or a shaft. They did use it for some studying of seismic readings and just kind of checking seismic action here in the area for a time. Not sure that that's been happening here in the last probably couple decades, but it did for a time. Now, here's the rest of the story. So I have it on some authority from some of the local people in the area who were young men at that time. There were a couple of things that happened. Number one, kids were warned not to go down here. That they were very protective of this. They didn't want any claim jumpers. Also that the well driller had guns. And he was protecting the land. So it was a little bit intense at the time. The second report that I had was that no one would confirm or deny or could factually verify that perhaps the oil that was originally found in the stream wasn't planted there by some maybe not so well-intending youth. Now, I don't know if that's true, that it was really a prank gone bad, quite honestly, or if at some point there was some oil somehow that ended up coming down the stream. But that was the initial reason that the landowner did begin to drill. And behind me, as you drive up Nebraska Hollow this year, maybe you're headed up to Oakwood Fruit Farm. Nebraska Hollow has been resurfaced and widened for safety. You can get up to Oakwood Fruit Farm a lot easier, which, by the way, just opened for their season. So they are now open. with their cider donuts, and they do have a couple of varieties of apples here on April 17th, where their retail store is open every day from 9 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. So, on your way up Nebraska Hollow, as you're just about ready to go up the hill to Oakwood Fruit Farm, just take a little look off to your left, and you'll see this little metal shed behind me, and just know that that was the only oil drilling prospector's oil shaft behind us. So now you know a little bit more history about the Richland area, and just a little bit of a story gone haywire with a lot of different weird meanderings and things to it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's an all original episode with some new angles to it. I hope that you're able to come out and enjoy our surroundings. It is beautiful. I think, as one visitor told me, even your landscape of your fields, trees, and hills is just very visually pleasing and relaxing. We would love if you'd come on out, visit our area, and just check it out for yourself. So, for Richland Center Tourism, I'm Marty Richards. Have a great day.